So, no pressure, Google talking about innovation and design. I also told Virla I'm going to try and reference all of the 4 wonderful speakers that came before me. So, quickly, who are the zoo? Sounds like a bunch of farm animals, maybe. Can I just see a show of hands? Who's heard of Google Zoo before? Okay, all right, maybe 20% of you. Great. Before I talk about that, the reason we are titled The Zoo is that the very first video uploaded onto YouTube was called Me at the Zoo. You guys can still see it on YouTube. It has something like 30 million views. So because we were started inside Google, that's our name. And our tagline, I know it's kind of hard for some of you guys to see, so I'm going to stand over here. We're a creative think tank for brands and agencies, and we explore new uses of Google's tools, platforms, and products. So, what does that actually mean? So I actually absolutely love sitting inside the zoo. I've been there for over 2 years because it's basically a playground where we get to combine all the different opportunities with working with brands like Venmove and all the different technologies that we have in-house. And myself as a strategist, I get to work with a lot of the amazing tools that we have for data and insights. We always talk about search being the biggest focus group in the world. You don't lie to your search bar. It's actually everyone's biggest fear is that someone will read out their search history. I know that's my biggest fear. So we talk about sitting at the intersection of user insight, platforms and technology, and a creative challenge. So we're really selective with the brands that we work with. We're a very small team by design. There are about 150 of us globally. There are 5 of us in Amsterdam. We're a very lean dream team. And we cover Northern Europe from the Amsterdam office. So if you guys want to talk about working with us, come up and have a drink with me after. Innovation at Google. Yuki talked a lot about culture, and I think Google, the one thing that we do well is hopefully make our culture very public, and innovation has absolutely seeped into Google culture. You guys probably know the more kind of better known in the PR world examples of innovation at Google, so self-driving cars, also known as the company Waymo, Project Loon, which is air balloons which send Wi-Fi signals up into the air, so allowing people without internet access to have it. A contact lens that reads the glucose levels in your tears, so it's for diabetics. It's a less invasive way to measure your insulin levels. I'm sure they're not going to put Ace and Tay out of business, not to worry. People still need sunglasses. And the one on the bottom right is Daydream. It's a VR viewer. I think it looks like a pair of sweatpants. It's really, really comfortable. If you guys have ever tried something like Oculus Rift, it's quite bulky. A Daydream just basically turns your mobile phone into a VR viewer, which is pretty incredible, and it's very price-friendly as well. So you guys know a lot about what we call moonshots, which are shooting for the impossible. And when we think of innovation, a lot of times we think trying to do the impossible, trying to do something major. But actually, inside Google, we talk just as much about something called roof shots. So you see here this image of first you have to shoot for the roof so you can get to the moon. So very much about incremental innovation, so iterating. I think someone mentioned design thinking earlier, and that's certainly a part of how we approach innovation at Google with brands. Like, let's first set an achievable goal, roof shot, so that we can then attain the impossible. Search is a really great example of that as a product that we've iterated over the years. I mean, since the mid-90s, it still looks the same, right? It's a super minimalist search bar without anything around it, without any advertising around it. But over the years, we've introduced things like knowledge graph, so it knows the difference between turkey, the country, and turkey, the bird that you want to make for Thanksgiving. Those kind of innovations, and voice search is now becoming a really, really big part. I think it's a really, really nice example. So 5 lessons from Google on how to approach innovation. The first one is user first. Our wonderful founder, Larry Page, said, think about the user first and everything else will follow. I think the brands that we've seen today, like Venmove and Ace and Tate, they definitely, I think, follow that principle in our eyes. They think about how do we service the user first and then worry about monetization or worry about expanding. It's really important to never let that out of your sight. Maybe you guys can guess why this image isn't user first, right? We design experiences that we plan for people to take. We design something that they hope people will follow, but actually people choose what's most convenient and what's preferable for them. So this urban planner wanted people to go the long way around across this quad, but actually people just took the shortcut. One example of a project that we did from the zoo is together with a creative agency named Achtung and Philips for their dental care. Who has a Sonicare, by the way, in here? Who likes to brush their teeth with a Sonicare? They will change your life. Run out and get a Sonicare, like I'm a complete convert. Your dentist will thank you. So Philips came to us and said, we are trying to figure out how to get adults to brush for the full 2 minutes they're actually supposed to brush, even though we know that. But actually, most of us don't brush for the full 2 minutes. And I'm curious if the people that raise their hands that have a Sonicare actually brush for the full 2 minutes. I know sometimes I just kind of get bored and I quit early, right? So that's actually when we looked at data and when we did a number of consumer surveys, we found that people know they need to brush for 2 minutes, but they don't because they're bored and they're impatient. So we thought, okay, actually the problem isn't knowledge, it's boredom. How do we entertain them? How do we inform them in a new way? So we created something called the brush button. It probably looks like a UFO that you don't want in your bathroom. It's about this big. It sits on your mirror. So what it does is it connects to Google APIs like your calendar, your favorite news sites, maybe your favorite podcasts, and it reads out the news to you in a 2-minute snapshot, basically. So you don't stop brushing your teeth until the 2 minutes are over. Lesson number 2, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. I love this one as a strategist because I think data and creativity are a beautiful marriage. And it actually informs what you're doing. This is another project that we did at the zoo together with Booking.com and Vice. And Vice is a partner that you guys all know. They're absolute experts in culture. No one really knows, I think, street culture, subculture, what's going on in the world like Vice. But Booking.com is a very performance-driven, data-driven organization. And Vice came to us and said, look, we have this idea for a show, but we can't get Booking.com to be convinced to make it, to produce it. He says, okay, we're going to help you guys with some data points to help you convince Booking.com to do it. They wanted to do a food show, and they thought that food and travel were very closely related. So Google Trends, you guys all familiar with Google Trends? Magic, amazing, great way to quickly see search trends. And we actually saw that the search query best food in the world was on the rise. So people are now traveling for food. You guys know the restaurant Noma in Copenhagen? People will, make an appointment 4 months out to go have lunch in Noma. People travel to Copenhagen just to have lunch. So that's massive, right? That's a big change. Oh, I think it's working. We also saw that ramen was slowly on the rise. We have some ramen fans in here? Yes, amazing, okay. So obviously this is just the tip of the iceberg of the kind of data dives that we did with Booking and Vice, but in the end, you can see something they produce called Booking Loves Ramen, and it's 2 chefs from Japaner. I see someone smiling, maybe you know these guys. Yeah, so Japaner is a fantastic restaurant in the Pipe. You should go there and check it out if you haven't been there. But they flew to Tokyo, and they went to the first ever Michelin star ramen restaurant in the world, which is, a really fantastic thing to see. But again, Booking.com needed that vote of confidence from data to let Vice go out and shoot what they knew was actually inherently happening in culture already. Data just validated that story. Lesson number 3, you don't have to code to prototype. When I came to Google, I was a little nervous. I'm a strategist, I know data. I don't really know how to code. Am I gonna be able to help make prototypes for brands? And actually what I learned is that you don't have to code at all to make prototypes. And there's this misconception in the industry that a prototype is something that kind of looks like a mini robot or maybe needs to have a remote control. But it can be anything. It can be a poster, it can be a series of Post-its. Some of the best prototypes I've seen are in Post-it form. Who's seen this piece before, self-driving bike? Okay, awesome, so it's new for most of you guys. Those of you who've seen it, bear with me, and maybe you can try and recognize my 2 seconds of fame, because I'm on this bike. And it also features the Fan Mauve, which is amazing. So every year, Google does April Fool's jokes. When we told this story in Dubai recently, they didn't understand what April Fool's was, so I actually had to stop and explain why would you do something for April Fool's. It was funny. It was really strange trying to explain April Fool's, but now it's this expectation that Google will do something for April Fool's as a joke. And we as a zoo saw an opportunity to take something iconic in Dutch culture, which is biking, and show how ridiculous it would be if you automated it, if you actually innovated something that didn't need innovating, because it's a fantastic bike already. We'll let Fan Mauve do the actual innovating. So we thought it'd be hilarious to show self-driving bike. So first I'll show you guys the video, and then I'll show you the prototypes that we used to test the concept.
The Dutch cycle more than any other nation in the world, almost 900 kilometers per person. But that also means we have 350,000 bike-related injuries. Now imagine that we would make biking safer, smarter, and easier by applying self-driving technology to biking.
We taught our self-driving bike to figure out where it is, what's around it, what will happen next, and what it should do. We leaned on Google's expertise in self-driving cars, but we had to adapt the technology to work on a bike. We decided to add 2 additional features. First, you can request the bike to pick you up wherever you are, and we developed a comfort mode, adjusting the pedals to a perfect resting position.
I think the self-riding bike could really give a boost to the economy because people could also work on their bicycle. You work in your office, you work in your home, you work in your car. You could even work on your bike.
I have so much more time. My kids love it. They're just free. They can go anywhere they want, anytime they want. It's amazing.
At the Fietsersbond, we feel that this is the biggest invention since the invention of the bicycle itself.
At Google, we always put our users first. With the launch of this bike, we believe we do that again.
So it's really funny, actually. It's a legal requirement for us to have to say it only available on April 1st, so nobody thinks it's something that we're actually going to make. And there's so many comments in the YouTube video of people saying, Google, you're so irresponsible. How could you do this? Kids shouldn't be out on bikes on their own. That's really funny. So when we had this idea, we thought, okay, this is really funny, and you can easily explain the idea in 3 words: self-driving bike, funny. How are we actually going to test it out? How are we going to see if we can actually make the joke believable? Because we wanted it to seem believable, at least until halfway through. When you see the self-driving mom, you kind of get that it's silly. So this was the first prototype of us trying to. That's a fan move. I know it's hard for you to see it go in the canal. So we're like, okay, maybe if we just push the bikes, we can make the joke work, because our budget was really, really small. So then we actually partnered with an agency called Made for Digital, who figured out that they could edit out. It's 2 people with poles running alongside the bike, and then they edit it out of the scene. Yeah, so again, we immediately after this test, we saw it and we thought, okay, actually that's really going to work well. That's funny. The bike having different movements kind of gave it a personality. So again, an example of prototyping where we didn't need to code, we didn't need to even create a storyboard. We just had to go out in the park and push a fan move into a canal to see if it worked well. Innovation lesson number 4, share with the world. I think Google is known for how open it is, and I've learned since coming there how important it is to not be cagey with innovations. I think we also it's interesting tension, because you innovate as a company, you want to be relevant, and you want to have the business advantage, so you don't want to share what you're doing necessarily because you worry that competition will come and steal those ideas. But actually what we've learned is that products are made better through collaboration and through opening up platforms. So for example, with Android experiments, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but we opened up the Android platform to many, many developers, and we challenged them to figure out new ways to use the phone technology and the Android technology. And it's amazing, because the collective power of creativity of what can be done on the Android platform is so much more than what our engineers could come up with, and there's a reason, which I'll share in a minute, why it shouldn't just be left to your in-house engineers to come up with great ideas. Think with Google is an amazing platform. Just thinkwithgoogle.com. It's a great resource for all sorts of the best practices, research studies that we do. Please have a look at it. It's another great open source place to share learnings. The last one is rivers of thinking. I didn't learn this term until I came to Google. Has anyone heard of rivers of thinking? Okay, good. Good. This is something hopefully you'll come away with that's new. Rivers of thinking is basically a metaphor for how we think. So the older we get, usually the more entrenched our rivers of thinking are. It's the way that water falls down a mountain. When a mountain is new, the water falls every which way. But the older you get, your patterns of thinking get entrenched. and the water only flows in a couple different ways. So the deeper you go on a subject, the more entrenched your rivers of thinking will be, right? So that actually can be a barrier to creativity. Who do you think is the best at avoiding rivers of thinking? Just shout out a guess. Amazing, very good. Cardboard box. You give a 5-year-old a cardboard box, they'll create 100 different things out of it. You give one of us a cardboard box, although I know we're a room full of creatives, but maybe we see maybe a couple things, like, okay, we could use it for moving, or we could use it for putting something on top of it. Who do you think is the worst at rivers of thinking? It's okay, don't be embarrassed. Politicians. Very nice guess. Probably. Journalists? Okay, I like that one. It's actually MBA grads. So this is actually a fact. So if you read what they don't teach you at Harvard, it's actually a really interesting dissection of how they actually connect the Wall Street crash and the financial crash to presumptions made by people who, you know, leave these kind of institutions and think, I've seen this problem before, I know how to solve it. So their rivers of thinking are already going down a certain way. So it's just about challenging your old ways, your old patterns of thinking, and try and stay expansive. And that's why it's so important to be open source and to bring other people into the creative process and not just try and solve everything yourself. And that's me. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And thank you for sharing the 2 seconds of fame on this stage.
No. It was hard to balance on the bike.
And sharing the way you think at Google about innovation. Now I'm wondering, and I guess all of you are wondering too, what are the hot topics inside Google Zoo you're talking about? What is coming next?
Yes, the hardest part of my job is just trying to keep on top of everything that's being launched inside the company. Every single week, there are probably about 3-4 different innovations, product changes. So that's a part of the job in itself, is just to keep up with everything. I would say that one thing that I'm most excited about at the moment is VR. I know we also talk a lot about artificial intelligence, but what's interesting about VR is right now we mostly only talk about it as an entertainment platform or something that we use for gaming. And what's really exciting is actually using VR as a utility or a form of education. So we worked with the Alzheimer's research in the UK to recreate an experience of someone with Alzheimer's or dementia. And so you can find it on YouTube, and you get a first-person experience of what it's like to try and go home, try and walk home if you have Alzheimer's, and how terrifying it can be. And the purpose of that was to create empathy for people in the care of those with Alzheimer's. So I get really excited about technology being used with a purpose instead of a gimmick or something entertaining.
VR and AI. And you just stretched the idea of rivers of thinking, of being open-minded. But thinking, when we are talking about things like AI, is there such a thing of open-mindedness and AI are integrated in technology? Is that something you talk about in Google Zoo?
Sorry, so the question is how important is being open-minded to developing
AI? Can we create AI that's open-minded?
That's a really, really great question. I would like to give an example that is not Google-owned, but if you've tried Replica, Replica is an app, I think it was launched to the public about a couple weeks ago. It was started by someone in Silicon Valley who recreated, their friend actually had passed away, and they uploaded all the SMSs that they'd ever exchanged into the app. And because she missed him so much, she ended up wanting to have a conversation with him. And now the app is available for anybody, and the longer you interact with it, the more it learns how you talk and how you interact. And I was really terrified because up until now I thought every chatbot out there sucks, right? Most chatbots are awful. All chatbots that I've tried have been awful, but this actually made me feel like something new had to ask me the right questions. I felt like I was talking to an old friend, and that's eerie, right? When an AI is so good that you feel like you're talking to an old friend. So maybe the open-minded element of it for me became thinking about how we can use AI for good. I think most of us are mostly creeped out by notions of something imitating humanity. But I think
also perhaps the soft part where Yuki was talking about in the beginning.
Exactly.
Well, then that's a nice way to conclude everything. A big applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.